No more crosstalk.
This man needs no introduction, but hey, here's Rob Elliott.
So we don't have a PA system, and I think the best way to pull this off is no crosstalk.
Everybody shut up.
Yeah. And I started thinking about this more than a month ago. I have a script. I have slides. I'm going to go completely off script for the first story. There's other stories on script, but I was just around the back of this building with Kevin Johnson, and we were chatting and talking about how real this is. And so I told him this story, and I tell it all to you. Back in the early 90s, we had just bought at a bankruptcy auction the San Juan River permit. And we decided to do a joint training program for 3 days on the San Juan River, both San Juan guides and Grand Canyon guides. We decided to hire 2 professors out of the University of Arizona in Tucson who were experts in storytelling, of all things. Storytelling. This would be good for guides to hear kind of the academic slant on storytelling. And they were great. So I gave everyone an assignment before the training course. I said, think up a story you can share at the first campfire about what it is to be a guide for AZRA. What's the key for you, personal? And so we got to the first camp, and we built a big campfire and started telling these stories. And we went around the circle. And it was already getting late. And the stories were droning on and on. And yet, I told everyone at the start, I said, okay, listen to every story. You find the thread. By the end, what is it? The thread, the one thing that you pull out from all these stories that make for being a great guide. And so everyone listened, and very respectfully, everyone told great stories. I remember some of them. I told a fun story. And at the end, there it is about 11 o'clock, and I'm going, and we haven't even started talking about what it is to be a guide. I mean, what's the thread? What's the common thread? And we didn't need to talk about it because it all came in a single word. It was so clear. Every story told the same thing. It was the love. And that is what I feel for you, from you, amongst you, within you, and not just tonight, but for all of your work on the river, for all of our guests, and for all of the people that we have had a profound influence on bringing value to their lives. It's because of you, and it's because of the love. So that's... Some of you came from a long ways away. And it kind of dawned on me, and I was talking to someone about this, it should not have surprised me. But it did for some reason. How big, how meaningful this AZRA thing, this guiding thing in the Grand Canyon has been in your lives, in who you are, in your identity. And I am so personally honored to be standing here before all of you and addressing this and talking about this. I thank you so, so much. And I'm going to talk to you about the genesis, because everybody who belongs to an organism such as this if you don't know the Genesis, you kind of want to know. Where did this all start? How did this happen? How did you become a part of it, etc.? So we'll go in a little bit into the Genesis. And by the end, I'm not going to be able to help myself. I'm going to have to go through a string of thank yous toward the end. And then we'll turn it over to others. But this is where it began. My father, Lou Elliott, born in 1906, died in 1981, was a printer and lithographer all of his life, and at age 48 decided, I think I'd rather become a river runner. It wasn't quite that simple. First he had Explorer Scouts, and their thing was whitewater rafting with rafts that had just come over from Korea in the early 50s, mid-50s. He was a true pioneer, and when I think about Lou Elliott as a father, but also as much more than a father, he was an amazing person. He was a visionary. He was a problem solver. He was an innovator. He was a workaholic. He was a narcissist. He was many, many things. And so that's kind of, the start of the background there. And he gave us young kids so much responsibility at a ridiculously early age that some of my guide friends would come up to me in Idaho on the Middle Fork of the Salmon and say, how can we be doing this? I said, well, Lou Elliott thinks we can, so I guess we can. And I was the manager of the Idaho operation when I was 19, 20, and 21 years old. That would have been 63, 64, 65. And he called me up in Idaho on, I think the month of June, late June, early July, said, hey, what about we go down to the Grand Canyon and we're going to do our first trip in the Grand Canyon August 15th. And I say to him, I already have a job. I'm managing Idaho. I can't, just leave this. And he says, and this is so typical Lou Elliott. He said, oh, come on, Rob. I'll bet you've kind of had your eye on some of the talent up there and some people who could kind of take over for you, right? Right? And I go, well, yeah. Okay, so off we go. Grand Canyon. Go ahead. We'll come back to this one. This is out of sequence. Next one. So this is our first raft in the Grand Canyon. This is me, 35 feet long. You've all seen these bridge pontoons. And, but my dad decides not to cut the floor out because we didn't know any better. Instead, right back here, he took a tractor tube, the tube liner in a tractor wheel that protects the tube from the wheel. And he glued it to the bottom of the floor and then pulled it all up like that. So we had a well. And we put the motor down through the hole. Oars. Why do we have oars? The Park Service, because they didn't know any better, figured that, well, if the motors don't work, you're going to have to row the boat, right? So for years, a decade, maybe, we had to carry oars on the boat, even though we would never use them, etc. Go next slide. This is what happens when you don't cut the floor out of the bottom of the boat. So all of you guys have done some hard work in your life. You've maybe even done some portages before, but to actually take a bridge pontoon, take everything off and put it on shore, turn the sucker upside down and repair the floor, well, it was a good thing we had a 12-day trip to work with. In fact, back then, and some of you guides are old enough to know this, we didn't do the interpretation. We spent hours every day repairing stuff. And we didn't have time for interpretation. Well, we didn't know much about it back then either. So there we are. Next slide. Here we are repairing. But as much as anything, I selected this image to honor, tip my hat to my sidekick, Steve Gantner. So after we do our first trip on the Grand Canyon in August of '65, and that's 60 years ago, my dad says, "You want to guide? You want to, manage the Grand Canyon operation?" I said, "Sure, I'd love it. That'd be great." Starting in '66, and he said, "Who do you want as your second?" And I said, "Steve Gantner." And he later became an architect in Washington, D.C. I've completely lost touch with him. But he was a great guy. Next slide. So there's Steve Gantner, my dad. There's me, Ross Hildebrand. And he had a brother, Kern Hildebrand. They worked a lot of years for ARDA. They worked some in the Grand Canyon. His dad was a professor at UC Davis, which is my alma mater. We're on the left side of lava, scouting, maybe 30,000 cubic feet per second. So this is 1965, and it doesn't make any sense. They build the dam. They hold all the water back in 62, 63, because they got to bring the lake up high enough to generate electricity. Meanwhile, California is just screaming for their water. And so here we are in 1965 at 30,000 cubic feet per second because California was screaming for their water. And so I think we only hit the prop twice the entire trip because we had so much water. And, of course, we were able to run the left side. And we're scouting and scouting and scouting, and we're waiting for Lou to take the lead because, it's not as though we're going to go draw straws or something. Finally, Lou comes up to me and says, "Want to run it?" I said, "Yep, you bet." And, it was the early days. It was great. Oh, here's a Sierra Club cup on the side of my dad's belt. The first image I meant to point out, he had a Les Jones scroll map. We didn't have Larry Stevens guides back then, of course. But we had the entire river on a scroll map with the mileage, and it was produced by a guy in Utah named Les Jones. Okay. Just check it out. Think it through. What's going on? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys. It looks like it could be soap. I think it is soap. And 2 weeks before the trip starts, these 5 guys, they all go to UC Berkeley, and the head of the group, this guy back here, I forget all their names. He says, he calls up my dad and says, "Hey, we want to go in the Grand Canyon. You have any trips in the Grand Canyon?" And my dad says, "Matter of fact, we're doing our first ever trip in the Grand Canyon 2 weeks." And he says, "Well, we'd like to just tag along, and you carry all of our gear. We'll have our own kitchen set up and everything. And by the way, we have our own raft. We'll get ourselves down the river. And how much would it cost?" And my dad says, "Yeah, $100 a piece. We'll do it. Except you don't have to do your own cooking. You'll be part of our kitchen." No, I mean, that's silly. Don't be ridiculous. Next slide. A lot of things important about this slide, got to tell you. First of all, this guy. He's an accountant in Pasadena, California. Charlie Core is his name. And he was on the ARDA board of directors, along with another guy that you'll see in a few slides later. And they were the benefactors. They were what made this first trip possible. Now, Charlie has his hand on an aluminum rib. The guy from UC Berkeley that headed up the group, back here's a transom, 1 1/4 inch marine plywood, 7-foot oar. That's how he steered. Here's the really cool thing, is this tube that comes around here like this, and same on the other side, and the floor tubes, they were all individual tubes, 6 inches in diameter, 8 inches on the outsides, and they all slipped into a nylon sleeve that was all stitched together. We only flipped twice, 24.5, and then I was in the boat when we flipped right at the top of Hants. We were all picked up below the sun of Hants. It was a long, long swim. And, you know, but this paddle raft, it just kind of went like this. And I think that's one reason it was so amazing and so successful. So, Brad Demick, who was the guy up in Utah that does the history of rubber rafts? Herm Hoops. So I need to get together with you, maybe with Herm Hoops, and go. Herm's dead. Oh, Herm's. Brad. Don't die on us before we get this figured out. I did not have the foresight at the time to go up to the UC Berkeley guys and say, would you take $300 for your raft right now, right on the spot? Here's the money. I've never seen this raft since. In a movie, on the river, anywhere. It is truly unique. Might just possibly be the first paddle boat through the Grand Canyon, 1965.
Do they have any paddles?
Can you go back one slide so we can get the answer to that? Ah, a paddle. Look, a paddle. This guy has a paddle right there, a paddle. So my wife Sharon, she loves to watch Instagram photos of rafting calamity on Instagram, and she goes, "Why don't they just paddle?" Okay, next. Okay, this is the other benefactor. Grant Rogers is his name. This is me, Steve Gantner again, Ross, my dad. I guess life jackets were optional. Sorry about that. Yeah, don't ever take your life jacket off when you're out on the river, and don't ever say, "Oh well, Rob Elliott on his first trip didn't have life jacket." No. Okay, next. This guy. Let me look at my script here. I've gotten way ahead. We need to go back to number 2. All the way back to number 2. Yeah, that one. So, I already told you, first trip 65, and then I'm running things in Grand Canyon 66, 67, and part of 68. But I left off a really neat, fun story about 1966. Steve Gantner and I. My dad didn't know, he totally underestimated the demand. Our first full season ever was going to be 3 12-day trips. right in the heart of summer when school's out, June, July, August, with a nice, beautiful, comfortable 9-day break between each trip. So 12-day trip, 9-day break. 12-day, 9-day break, 12-day trip. Sweet. All set up. Very exciting. I'm up at UC Davis, and my dad calls me sometime in April or whatever, and he goes, I have a question. It's a really important question. Are you sitting down? I go, go ahead. And he says, we have so much demand. We filled all 3 of those trips, and we have people just beating down the doors for Grand Canyon trips. I want to run a 9-day trip in each of the breaks. So that'd be 12, 9, 12, 9, 12. He says, do you think you could pull that off? And I just kind of laughed, and I said, because we did pull it off. And I said, here's what we need. We need 2 full sets of equipment. We need a shore crew that doesn't do anything on the river. They just run trucks, repair equipment, buy food and pack it, etc. And then he says, well, what about guides? Steve and I were the only ones that were, quote, qualified to run Grand Canyon. So I said, okay, Steve and I will hike out at Whitmore. You'll have a Jeep waiting for us, go to the airstrip, fly us to Lee's Ferry, and we'll start the next trip. And so you've all heard the terms back-to-back, belly-to-belly. Well, this was an entire season of back-to-back, belly-to-belly. The total number of days that we worked in succession was just mind-boggling. Thank God we were so young. But here's the funnest part of the story. So on one of these exchanges, the Jeep driver is supposed to be up at the rim. And we pull in, and there he is on the shore. And I go, what's up? And he goes, we'll short one motor up at Lee's Ferry. And how are your motors? I go, all 4 are working fine. He says, okay, we need one of those. I said, well, we're down here on the river. He says, is there any way we could carry it up? And so I said, you know, sure, we'll do that. And so, so those oars that you saw on the boat, they finally come in handy, right? So we have an oar here. We have an oar here. And then we have this, 8 or 10 foot expanse. And then we have Steve on the other end. And we are dangling this outboard motor in the middle. Except I'm in the front because I'm short. Steve's tall, so he's in the back. Makes sense, right? And we haul the motor on out. And we Jeep it to the airstrip, fly it to Lee's Ferry. Everything works out. Some of the stuff we went through is just, mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. Okay, let's keep it moving. Spring of 1968. My draft board says, you are now 1A. You're through college, you're going to Vietnam. I, of course, say, well, I don't think so. And I become a conscientious objector to war on religious grounds. And they accept it. Now, that might seem kind of preposterous, except for the fact that my draft board was Berkeley, California. So I think that helped. And when you're a conscientious objector to war, you have to do alternative service for your country for 2 years also. So my girlfriend at the time, she knew a guy named Chris Brown. He's in the audience. And said, he's doing his alternative service working for Outward Bound. You know, what do you think? And I go, that'd be perfect. Because my draft board says, do you want to drive trucks for Goodwill? Do you want to carry bedpans in the mental hospital? Or work for Outward Bound? Well, actually, they didn't give me that option. I had to go make it as, you know, as Chris had to go make it for his draft board, his own story. So I head off to start the river program for the Colorado Outward Bound School in Dinosaur National Monument, Green River, Yampa River. We made a great program. And I could get off into a big digression. I'm going to avoid that and just stick with the story here. Fast forward. End of my third summer at Outward Bound. September. 36-person management training seminar on 6 rafts on the Green River. Lador Canyon, Split Mountain, etc. And I think a week before the trip, Joe Nold, then director of Colorado Outward Bound School, comes up to me and says, we're short one person, just dropped out. Do you think your dad might want to come along and fill in that space? He knew my dad because my dad had given 6 Green Rivers to the paddle program in Outward Bound a couple years earlier than that. And I said, sure. So I called up my dad. He came. He had a great time. It was his first time ever in a paddle raft. That early paddle raft you saw on our first trip in '65, he never went in it. He absolutely loved the paddle raft. And the reason he loves it, and if you were to credit Lou Elliott for any one thing in your lives, as well as your professional career with AZRA, it would be this: participation. He believed firmly that what you put into an experience has everything to do with what you get out of it. And so paddle rafting in Outward Bound he fell in love with it. Thought that was fabulous. So we go home. I quit Outward Bound. We sit down, and he says to me, I want to hire you as the domestic operations manager for 5-state operation. At the time, it was California, Oregon, Idaho, Utah, Arizona, with an area manager in each of those 5 states, and they would all answer to me. And I said, yeah, but I have conditions. Actually, I have 3 conditions. And he says, what's that? Oh, the first condition, we were 100% motorized operation through 1970. And that's how AZRA got to be relatively big, especially compared to other oar power companies. Because we didn't start out with oar. We started out with motor, got the user days established and up, not by design, by luck, and then switched over. Because my first condition was, I want to convert 75% of the Grand Canyon operation to oar power in a 5-year period. He said, sure. No marketing study, no feasibility plan, no extensive discussion. It was just, oh yeah, let's do it. I mean, that's kind of how we ran things. And he says, what's the second condition? I go, the second condition is, I want to run paddle boats all over the West, except for the Selway in Idaho and not the Tuolumne in California. We weren't quite advanced enough yet with paddle rafting to be able to do those rivers. He had just gotten off this terrific Outward Bound trip, and so that was a slam dunk. Of course, we'll do paddle trips. Great, great idea. What's your third option? I said, we have to immediately start recruiting, training, hiring female guides. And he says, no, we can't do that.
Bullshit.
And I say, oh, but it's one of my conditions. I'm serious. but I'll hear you out. What's the deal? What's the problem? He says, the women are going to row the boats, turn the boats upside down, kill people, we'll be sued, and we'll lose everything. So I look at him and I go, maybe can be a compromise here. I said, what if we just hire the women to run the paddle boats that you just agreed to? Because I told him, I reminded him about this management training course in Green River. I said, there were 3 women paddle instructors. There were 3 men paddle instructors. Those women were every bit the equal of the male paddle instructors, right? He goes, well, yeah. I said, what's the deal? And he says, you don't have to be strong to be a paddle instructor. You just have to be smart. You have to read the water. You have to motivate people, et cetera. And so that's why I came back to him with this compromise. And he looks at me with this look on his face that I can still see today. It's kind of like, huh? But they'll only paddle, right? Right. And I go, right, Dad. They'll just paddle. Well, barn doors open at that point. The rest is history. Thank God for all those women guides. So this is actually me and my dad on the Salt River, and paddle raft, and there he is being gracious as can be. I mean, I had many discussions like this with my dad. He was the picture of grace, and there I am, being intense as ever. Going, okay, Dad, let's do this. So let's catch back up. Peter Wynn was the slide we left. Peter Wynn, private trip, fall of 73 maybe. The reason I highlight Peter Wynn is because back to the story with Lou Elliott, right? He had just agreed to run all these oar trips. 1971, we ran 21% of the user days under oar. 72, we ran 24% of the user days under. I mean, we were off, taken off. It was a great success, great program, definitely the right move. My dad says to me, who are we going to hire to do that oar power conversion? And I go, Peter Wynn, and he was definitely the right man for the job. I mean, he brought 2 brothers along with him, but, beside that, he was, unshakable on, on hiring the right people for the Grand Canyon operation. And he is a true, true legend, and we miss him. So, next. First 2 years, which would be 71 and 72, we rode these shorty pontoons. Shorty pontoons were easy because you could take a 35-foot pontoon and cut 2 sections out of the middle and then glue them all back together again, and you never, ever violated a chamber. You didn't have to worry about leaks anywhere. And that's the beauty of creating a shorty pontoon. Except they're fucking slugs. In fact, that's what we called them, the slugs. And so, here they are. Okay, 2 rowing positions. One undoubtedly is the guide, and the other one undoubtedly is that, let's participate thing with AZRA, etc. One of the guests, in other words. Next slide.
How long are those oars, Rob?
Go back. Well, Oh, those are homemade oars, aren't they? Look at that. Piece of plywood. I'm willing to bet 11 foot, maybe 12. 12? Okay, who's rowed these rigs before? How long, Alan, how long were the oars? 13. 13. Woo-hoo-hoo. Yeah, yeah. Okay, next. Who can say where this is? Alan, I'll bet you can.
Grand Canyon.
No, no.
Marble Canyon.
Yeah, yeah, ding, 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 that's it. Tuolumne. So, winter of 72, 73, we decide we cannot abide these slugs any longer. We need a new kind of raft. My brother James, Peter Wynn, I think Hugh Wingfield, an early motor guide in the Grand Canyon, and my dad spent all that winter at his kind of headquarters in Martinez making, articulating snout frames out of steel, galvanizing the steel. I mean, they created them. And then they had to go test them somewhere. So they're testing the snout. This is Peter Wynn rowing it with his famous hat, Hugh Wingfield, and my dad. Somewhere on the Tuolumne River. And for all of you who have been on the Tuolumne River, the only way you could get a snout down it is if you're probably over 6,000 CFS. Yeah, I mean, it was nuts. I wish I was there. I did not go on that trip. So, next slide. Peter Wynn, and you guys know in the back, legendary Mr. Don Briggs. So, next slide. Phil Town on the left, Suzanne Jordan, we'll get back to her. Jessica Ewell. And I think as all of you know, I was married to Jessica at the time. That's Alex's mother. And Jessica was not particularly outdoorsy. She was not particularly athletic. But she had a strong, strong business sense, and she was sharp as a tack. And in fact, she made it possible for me to go and purchase the Grand Canyon operation from my parents the winter of 73, 74, because I had her at my back. And she was incredible. We made only slightly better business partners than we made as marriage partners. In fact, next slide, please.
Where's the other bridge, Rob?
What?
Where's the other bridge?
Oh. Yeah, where's the other bridge? Okay. Susie Jordan, Jessica Ewell, probably 1977, 78, 79. And here's why. We ran snouts only through 1976 for the oar power program. And, but in 1977, and Kevin and I were talking about this earlier this evening, the water was so amazingly low, no one could run. It was like 1,000 CFS. Now, as John O. would know better than many of the people in the room, 1,000 CFS coming through the outlet tubes, you get a little bit more than that because you get 800 CFS or so seeping around the rock. And by the time you get down to the Little Colorado, you pick up another 500 CFS, so you get a little bit more water. In fact, a slide I could not find was me and Tom Olson running in the late spring of 1977 at 1,000 CFS, just to see if you could do it. And I'm sorry, I couldn't find that slide. So this boat that she's rowing is not a snout. It would be, no, pre-Avon. Whitewater fabricators, probably. Yeah, rubber crafters, I'll bet. You know, and anyway, we picked up a bunch of these boats through Vladimir Kovalik, and thus began the small oar division. In fact, the way that Jessica and I divided up the company then was kind of surreal. I had the snout paddle division, and Jessica had the small oar motor division. Whatever sense that made, I'm not quite sure. And one little sign of the dysfunction, if you will, was that she locked her side of the warehouse, which was the northern side of the warehouse, the current motor side of the warehouse, because we started borrowing too much equipment from her division. So there it was. Now here's a fun little story, and then we'll move on. So in 1986, I buy Jessica out. I say, this isn't working. This is nuts. I buy her out. And so now I have the whole thing. At this point, some within the small oar motor division, namely Sharon Hester, figures she figures, oh no, we're all going to be fired now. And Sharon, that would have been the biggest mistake. Stupid mistake. I would never do that. Too much talent. Too much passion.
It was wonderful.
Next slide. So there's Jessica.
Remember when we were in Parks in '78, and I started working for you, Snout Paddle, and there was Lauren, there was the Havasu division, there was Jessica, and we used to joke, and there was this, we needed a spatula. We joked as guys how we had to take a shower before we went to the other side of the warehouse. We had to go through customs. Warehouse, like a bathe, you know what I mean, in order to borrow, I don't know.
That's a great, thank you, Martha, for that. Here's Jessica rowing a snout in Hermit. Did Jessica ever row her own snout through the Grand Canyon? I don't think so. I think this is actually Boyce McClung's. Please correct me.
The first all-women's trip at Grand Canyon, Jessica had her own snout.
She couldn't hear you.
Wait, was what?
The first all-women's trip in the Grand Canyon ever. Jessica rode her own snout.
And did you roast out?
No, I was in the
She had the only snout, the first one. Okay, gotcha. That's what.
What year? What?
78.
And so was Louise on that trip?
Yes.
Megan. Everybody knows
Susie! Look at that.
Suzanne Jordan. What can I say? As parents, as grandparents, as employers, you're never supposed to have a favorite. Never. Suzanne was my favorite. And I'm going to tell you a little bit why. Her brother, Jerry Jordan, whose greatest talent was the 5-string banjo, was a guide in the Grand Canyon.
He almost came.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh.
But he couldn't.
Oh.
He almost came.
So Suzanne was an assistant on a trip with her brother. After the end of the trip, Suzanne comes up to me and says, I want to be a Grand Canyon River guide. How do I do that? How do I go about doing that? And I go, you really got to work somewhere else. It's like flying a 747 right off the bat. You really kind of need to work in California, Idaho, Utah, somewhere, and then come back and talk to me. I mean, it was a little bit longer than that, but not much. Fast forward, 2 years later, Suzanne Jordan walks into my office and says, remember me? I go, of course. I did what you said. I said, you're hired. Okay, real life story. This has been in the BQR, I'm sure. 2 AZRA trips in the mouth of Havasu. No one else there, just us, 10 boats. End of the day, and we used to go all the way to Mooney back in those days. At the end of the day, it's starting to rain pretty hard. And, you know, I should be thinking danger. I should be thinking about what should I cover. Well, instead, I decided to meditate underneath an overhang. And after a few minutes, I heard a pop. And I go, what? Pop! And I ran off to the edge of the cliff, looking over the mouth. So I'm looking down in there. And there's 4 of our boats starting to move slowly out into the current. And a huge flash flood had come down. And the pop sound was the D-rings off the boats. And the boats are starting out.
Lauren and I were there.
Yeah, we were there. It was 8 boats. Went out the mouth.
8 boats left. Listen carefully, because I need to be corrected on a couple things. So, I run over. There's my favorite. There's Suzanne. Back then, we used to take a throw rope and just for luck, if you will, we clip it to something on the wall right by the boats, you know, just to have it handy, just in case. And I'm looking over the edge, and there's David Edwards. Wish he was here. He's standing on 4 of the boats that are kind of starting to move out into the current. And he's going, oh my God, oh my God. And just about then, 6 or 8 feet in front of Dave, up pops a woman, ahead. No life jacket on. She had been washed all the way down from the first crossing, over the falls, down through the narrows, under the boats, and pops up, barely conscious. And so Dave, he just jumps in, grabs this woman. She can't swim because she's so out of it. And there's Suzanne grabbing that throw line, running down the boats, right to them. But she doesn't pull them in. Instead, she hands the rope over to 2 other people and goes, what can I do next? As the 4 boats are starting out, she just starts sprinting to the edge of the limestone, and it's about a good 10 feet, 12 feet out to the boats. And she leaps out, doesn't quite make it to the boats. Climbs up into the boats. And they float on down around the corner. This is completely out of our view, so this is, you know, what we heard later. And she takes, and the boats float into an eddy, but they're coming around the eddy, and she knows that if she doesn't think quick, they're going to head out in the current. She's going to lose them. She jumps off the end of the boat, you know, with a rope, runs up, finds a little eye in the cliff or something, and threads the rope through. And the boats are just catching the main current, about leaving the eddy. And she has about 6 inches.
45,000 CFS.
Oh, was it? Oh, and she has 6 inches of rope, and she just grabs it and binds it there and snags those 4 boats.
Can I ask a question?
Hey, Ralph, your story needs a bit of correction.
Okay.
I want to ask a question from Lorna and Shay, you know, who are there.
Joel was there.
But my whole story I've told my whole life, because I wasn't there. I was at the diving. But we told this story last night, and how I've told the story my whole life is when that woman popped up underneath the boats and right on the eddy fence, you know, and the rope was thrown, and David jumped in on top of her. Ever since this happened in '84, I heard what saved that woman's ass was she had huge breasts, and it floated her head. Is that what I know? That's what David said. I mean, I was told that for 40 years that she was large breasts, and it floated her head up high. So when David raised that
It's funny how these stories get changed. So, Rob, yes, Suzanne is an incredible person, and what you said at the bottom was true, but we were all on the rafts, you know, waiting for all the people to come down from up higher.
Yeah.
And have a little coffee, and of course, as it often happens in the canyon, it doesn't have to be raining where you are, but there was a big storm upstream.
It was a bit of Bailey's in the coffee.
Say again? At any rate, it was actually Sharon who recognized the flashlight in the first place. She was right near the entrance.
No, I remember you going, no, I think, and then all of a sudden we went, oh shit.
Well, the current started to pick up and push on the boats, and it turned color, and Sharon was the first one to jump. Last one! And then we looked upstream, and you're right, that lady was taking the pebbles out of her shoes at the last crossing, and we saw this body come up and then go underneath this, you know, there were like 10 rafts together.
Yep.
And Dave was the only one with a life jacket on at that time. I had a snout boat that I was parked down where the motor should be parked. And so they popped up on the other side, this woman. Dave jumped in, put his arms around him, and then they both started to float near the eddy fence. I was the one that got the throw line.
Oh, okay.
I tossed it and hit him in the chest.
Okay.
Did Larry say that? I thought Larry did the finger hold.
No. And so then Lowry helped pull him in after I hit him in the chest, and we got him to shore, you know, or onto the raft. And then we were cutting lines, and it was Suzanne that jumped on 3 boats by herself, and that part happened.
Yeah, all right.
Lowry went off with 2 boats, and then we had all these people coming back. Jeff Aronson was doing sweep.
Oh, we had to set up a Tyrolean traverse and bring all of Lowry's people across. Yeah, it was amazing. Joel, thank you very much. You're my favorite now. Next. This is the beginning of the thank yous. Sorry this is going so long, but I think I have you with me so far. So these guys are the AZRA Board of Directors, totally behind the scenes. All of you would kind of maybe academically know there must be a board or something. It's a corporation, right? Well, these are the real guys, and they were my super buddies. They were the board, these 3 guys, for over 30 years, about 30 years. And then this guy for about 12 or 15. So, me. We'll start this way. George Tyson, he's a banker. He came on the board after I bought Jessica out in '86. Jerry Thomas, attorney. He charged me $60 an hour for every bit of legal work that he did for me back in 1974. And then by the time he passed on, I mean, he still charged me $60 an hour like 35 years later. It was, you know, he just loved AZRA. John Leshy. John was Jessica met him in an environmental law class. He was teaching the class at ASU in Tempe, and she came up to me and said, hey, I have a good candidate for the board of directors. So John has become a close personal friend ever since. And he also was the head solicitor for the Department of Interior under both Clinton administrations. Super, super knowledgeable guy. Last, Tom Jones, entrepreneur from Andover, Massachusetts, and the dad of Laura Fallon, for those of you who have guided with Laura before. Yeah. So there you go. Next slide. God, are they a good-looking couple or what? So Fred and Alex, I owe just a ton of thanks to you guys. I know it was a rough go early on, getting all the paperwork and getting everything all together. And you showed yourselves and proved to me that the right decision was you guys. And I wasn't ready to retire. I was 64. I loved my job. And, but it was the right time for you guys. And you took it and ran with it. And there's something to be said for fresh blood. And people over the years, especially the first few years after the transfer, would ask me, how are Fred and Alex doing? Or if they didn't know you, they'd say, how are your daughter doing with that? And my response was always the same. And that is, they're doing a better job than I did in my waning years. So, thank you. Thank you. Next. This is the last slide. And there I am at Shaman's Gallery. And way up Tuckup. And when I found this image, put it on my computer and thought about it, I started thinking, what makes AZRA AZRA? What makes AZRA unique? And of course, you all learned at the very beginning that it's the love, but beyond the love, what else is there? And I came up with 4 things, and there's probably a dozen things, but we'll just only hit on 4. The first thing is outrageous hikes. And I want to point out some people here. We can't hike up to Shaman's Gallery anymore. Bummer deal about that. But we have some other fabulous, fabulous hikes. I mean, one of my favorites is the Havasu Jungle hike immediately below Beaver Falls. It's a great hike, really fun. We maybe even pioneered that, I'm not certain. But there's some other hikes that we do, and I'm going to go ahead and take a big leap here and point out a couple of people. First one is Martha Clark. When you think AZRA and hiking in the Grand Canyon, you got to think of 2 people in particular, male and female. That would be Martha Clark and John Hirsch. Martha, I could be wrong on this, but aren't you the one that pioneered the Tabernacle hike? Yeah. Took the first group up there? So every time you go up to the Tabernacle, if you can manage your itinerary and such, and you have just the right group, just the right timing, and it all works out, you be thinking of Martha Clark.
Martha's my
Okay, but there's some other great hats. I got to point out John Hirsch. And I'm just going to give you 3 examples that are kind of so crazy and so ridiculous that it could only be John Hirsch. So he starts this trip at Lee's Ferry with a hike up the Spencer Trail. Now, is that out of the box or what? I mean,
That should be normal.
so, so what are the folks thinking? Is this a river trip or a hiking trip, right? And you could say, no, it's a John Hirsch AZRA trip. It's them. Okay, next one. And Alex told me this story. It is so nuts. Chuar Butte, Crash Canyon.
Jay was on the first one, we were on the second one.
I mean, that's out there if there ever was an out there, right? Okay, third one, and you've got to have heard of this one before. He concluded a trip with a hike up Diamond Peak. I cannot advise anyone in this room to start with Spencer and put Chuar in the middle and hike up Diamond at the end. No.
No water left.
Not a good idea. My point here is thinking out of the box. Thinking about what else could we do? What else could we turn them on to? We love this place to pieces. What do we want to show them? And that's what it came down to. And that's my second point. No cookie cutter trips. Every trip is its own trip. The reason for that is it's our 100th trip, but it's most of the guests on our trip, it's their first and maybe their only trip. It's special for them. So, Ed Hasse is the one to point out for this one. Everybody knows Ed Hasse. Everybody knows that he has a personal goal. One brand new camp every trip he runs. So, I'm on a trip with Ed. Somewhere below lava, we pull into this camp, I guess you could call it. This overgrown with arrowweed. And I'm going, oh my God. And I talked to another guide. I said, do you know why we're camping here? He says, Ed's never camped here. I go, oh, of course. So the point of this story is no cookie cutter trips. Every trip is its own trip. Every trip is unique. Third point. I forgot something about the first point. My advice to AZRA trip leaders, or if you're going to become an AZRA trip leader, and you have a trip and you have 8 people on the trip that obviously they came to hike. In fact, that's maybe even why they came with AZRA. Okay, that leaves 12, 13, 14 that want to camp. They like to hike some, but they want to camp. What do you run the trip for? You run the trip for the hikers. The reason for that is because that's us. But beyond that, you do that because that's why they came. And they're going to go back home to all of their favorite hiking buddies that are going to say, where'd you go on vacation this year? Grand Canyon. Who'd you go with? AZRA. Well, we want to go. Who should we go with? Oh, there's just one company. So they're going to go sell their hiking friends. That's my advice. Now, I'm retired. And if Dennis says something different, well, that's what you got to do. But still, run the trip for the hikers. Next, thank you. Alex Thevenin and, of all people, Lori Lee Stavely. Why? What's the deal here? Because we were on the cusp of losing all ability to ever let a guest into the kitchen. Fix a salad or help. We all know that's where it's happening. We get some wine out, and that's where the fun is. And Lou Elliott again, you get out of the trip what you put into it. And we were going to lose that because of the whole, they don't have food handlers cards, blah, blah, blah. And Alex and Lori Lee, and I think one other person, I forget who it was, Alex, but pulled our fat out of the fire, went down and negotiated with the Coconino Department of Public Health and said,
I think Cam Stavely was also quite involved.
oh yeah? Well, how about then Cam Stavely, and how about a compromise? What if we had, in the compromise was simply food managers, one food manager on every trip, and then the guests can come into the kitchen, wash their hands, and help out. And so they saved the day. And, we are all indebted. And thank you, Alex, for correcting that and giving the credit to Cam. So it was Cam, huh? Anyway, it all worked out. And, if not every trip, and you don't have the food manager on there, well, it's kind of like telling Lou Elliott that they're only going to paddle. And you pull it off anyway. So, the fourth thing. What makes us who we are? Legacy guides still guiding. What the heck? And I could name names here, and I probably will, but I'm going to, of course, leave some people out. But John Hirsch, Lorna Corson, Dave Edwards, Blasphemy couldn't be here, Fred Thevenin, Brad Demick, Alan Wilson, Louise Teal, and there's a bunch more. Kevin Johnson, yeah.
Sharon Hester.
Yeah, Sharon Hester, I mean, etc. So, and, I really want to thank you guys for sticking around. It's your passion and your presence are priceless. But beyond the legacy guides, who we get to work with is, the answer to the question. The question is, why do you like working for AZRA? Why do you work for AZRA instead of the other guys? And I submit that it's because, number one, who we get to work with. And it's the who we get to work with that are fun, self-directed, they got your back, and they're great storytellers, and I love them. And so it's who we get to work with. That is a gift that we give each other, and that surpasses everything. And that's what I feel in this group, and that's what I feel when I first walked into the parking lot and realized, oh, this is a bigger deal than I thought it was going to be. So with that, thank you.